Okay. All right. Assalamu alaikum. Greetings of peace to all of you. Thank you for joining us once again this afternoon for the 25th installment of our Injustice at Home webinar series. Today's episode is co-sponsored by the Afia Foundation, a member organization of the Coalition for Civil Freedoms. My name is El-Hajj. I'm the Executive Director of CCF. Our mission is to defend civil liberties and advocate for the rights and freedom of political prisoners targeted and criminally prosecuted in the war on terror. A week ago today, we and many others around the world were heartbroken to learn of the passing of Dr. Agha Saeed, an American Muslim civil rights icon, public intellectual, and hero for justice. For decades, Dr. Saeed was a prominent anti-war activist, a fearless champion of human rights, who founded numerous organizations dedicated to the political empowerment and civil rights of American Muslims. As you will see in 3 special video clips we've prepared for you today, Dr. Saeed was also a tireless advocate for justice for political prisoners and warned against the excesses of government and of dangerous and discriminatory programs such as COINTELPRO in its modern day iterations. In 2010, Dr. Saeed served as the first board chair of our own organization, which at the time was called the National Coalition to Protect Civil Freedoms. At our 10th anniversary gala, CCF recognized 2 champions of human rights, one of whom was Dr. Saeed, and the other who joins us here today, alhamdulillah, El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan, in tribute to his dear friend and brother. In this next hour, we will honor the life and legacy of Dr. Agha Saeed and his many contributions to the Muslim community in America and oppressed people around the world, reflecting on his many achievements and sacrifices, including being targeted himself by the security state, are 2 other community leaders and former political prisoners, my father, CCF founder, Dr. Sami Al-Arian, and Dr. Ghulam-Nabi Fai. And subhanAllah, I actually had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Fai's beautiful family, including his daughter, at Dr. Saeed's house about a decade ago. At the time, both of our fathers were targeted and incarcerated in prison and under house arrest. Dr. Saeed very much embodied the vision and spirit of CCF, which was to create a network of support and community for impacted individuals. He was very much a role model and a beloved uncle to all of us. I'd like to turn it over to our speakers, but first would like to briefly introduce them. El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan, who will moderate this webinar and reflect on his own experiences with Dr. Saeed, is a human rights advocate, author, and poet who serves as the Director of Operations at the Afia Foundation. Brother Mauri hosts a weekly program on the South African media station called Salam Media on Sunday afternoons called A Conversation with Mauri Saalakhan. His activism has taken him to Muslim and other marginalized communities across the country and around the world, where he has led numerous campaigns calling on freedom and justice for political prisoners, including Afia Siddiqui and Imam Jamil Al-Amin, aka H. Rap Brown, among many others. And subhanAllah, tonight, actually, if you follow him on Facebook, you'll see he has a presentation tonight about Imam Jamil Al-Amin, and tomorrow a presentation on the case of Afia Siddiqui. Brother Mauri has authored numerous books and articles, which you can find on his and the Afia Foundation website. You can, and I highly encourage you to order his recent book entitled The Imprisonment of Imam Jamil Al-Amin, Is It a Government Conspiracy? Next, we have my father, Sami Al-Arian, who is the director of the Center for Islam and Global Affairs, SIGA, and public affairs professor at Istanbul Zaim University. He received his PhD in computer engineering in 1986 and was a tenured professor in Florida, for which he received numerous awards. During his 4 decades in the US, Dr. Al-Arian founded numerous institutions and publications in the fields of education, research, religion, and interfaith, as well as civil and human rights. He was a prolific speaker across many US campuses, especially on Palestine, Islam in the West, and civil rights. In 2003, as many of you know, my father was targeted in a politically motivated prosecution in which he struggled for his freedom for 12 years until his deportation in February 2015. Paying tribute to Dr. Saeed will also be another distinguished speaker and human rights advocate, Dr. Ghulam-Nabi Fai. Dr. Fai has been the leading spokesman for the Kashmiri cause for over 4 decades and currently serves as the Secretary General of the Washington-based World Kashmir Awareness Forum and the founding chairman of the London-based Justice Foundation International Institute of Kashmir Studies and Kashmir Press International, Washington. He is also the Secretary General of the London-based World Kashmir Freedom Movement. Dr. Fai is a prolific writer and speaker, having published in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Chicago Tribune, among various media outlets, and he has traveled to over 40 countries lecturing on the subject. He has also addressed the United Nations and UNHCR and organized several conferences on Kashmir on Capitol Hill and in New York City, featuring numerous dignitaries. Last but certainly not least, I'm honored to be joined by my dear friend and sister, the devoted daughter of Dr. Agha Saeed, Sasha. Sasha is a caseworker at Castlemont High School in East Oakland, California, an activist and a singer. With her, I believe, are other siblings of Dr. Saeed and family members who will also honor his memory here today. I'd like to extend my deepest condolences to the family of Dr. Saeed and all who surely are mourning this tremendous loss. May Allah grant him mercy in the highest level of Jannah. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raja'un. Without further ado, I'll sign off and turn it over to you, Brother Mauri, to lead the discussion. Jazakallah khair.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. I want to begin by greeting our friends and our guests, the panelists, the executive director of CCF, Coalition for Civil Freedoms, with our greetings of peace, Assalamu alaikum, and to thank you on my behalf personally and on behalf of all those who knew and deeply cared about our dear brother, Dr. Agha Saeed, for having the thought to put together a program of celebration and remembrance of this nature. I begin with a poem I wrote many years ago, titled Condolence. The death of a loved one, be they family or friend, is accompanied by sadness for how we will miss them. But death is a reality that will come to us all. The acceptance of this will bring comfort to all. When seen in this light, it may be viewed as a friend, or as life passes by, a new life begins. Our brother, Dr. Agha Saeed, was in a tremendous personal struggle for the final years of his life. He had Parkinson's, and I remember, especially on my last visit with him to California, feeling a bit of emotional weight on my own heart for a man who had such a profoundly committed heart and had so much such a strong sense of commitment to wanting to make, this life of ours better for all. He was unable to communicate, during those final years, and for me, it weighed heavily on my heart to see that, because he has so much that he needed to say. He had so much that he wanted to give, and at times I felt the frustration. But alhamdulillah, and I'm speaking from a very personal point of view now. This brother, the imprint that he was able to make with the life that Allah gave him, with the struggles that he had to endure, is just incredible. I mean, the impact that he made. And inshallah ta'ala, during the course of this discussion we're going to have we're going to be showing 3 short clips of Dr. Saeed at his best, addressing issues of common concern, issues of importance. But before we introduce the first clip, we want to begin this conversation with the guests who are here. And in fact, let us begin with you, Dr. Sami. How the way that Dr. Agha Saeed's passing came to my attention was through that beautiful remembrance that you composed and shared, that came to my attention, and no doubt the attention of many others. Why don't we begin there with you expounding upon some of the thoughts that you shared in that very warm hearted piece, Aki, and share with us, if you can recall when you first met Dr. Agha Saeed, what the circumstance was, and then what your relationship has been over the years, especially during the time when you and your family were under a tremendous amount of government instigated oppression. Why don't we begin there, Dr. Sami Al-Arian?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much, Brother Mauri, for hosting this, and thank you to the coalition for bringing this to the audience and to all our friends and friends of Dr. Agha. Dr. Agha, to me, was the ultimate intellect activist. Professors who just simply talk about ideas and try to advance certain positions, but they sit in their offices waiting for others to take these ideas into action, are plenty. The rare commodity, the rare personality is someone who takes these ideas and go into the forefront, not just digging and going to the streets, but also try to go from center to center, community to community, person to person, in order to advance these ideas, particularly when these ideas may not be the prevailing ideas. There could be ideas that in certain circumstances, in certain societies, people may think that these are subversive because they talk about justice. And whenever you talk about justice, that means there is an injustice. And when there is an injustice, that means there are people who have an interest of keeping this injustice. My first recollection of meeting Dr. Agha Saeed was probably around 1990-91, I think, in a conference where I saw him speaking. And of course, he caught my attention because, again, as an academic, as a professor of political science, he was talking also about empowering the Muslim community and empowering people of color. And that was very rare at the time. Most people would be talking about da'wah, talking about different kinds of religious issues, but talking about political empowerment was not something that was that you would find in these kind of circumstances. The next time I think I saw him was in Tampa, the city I was living in. This was in Washington, D.C., the first encounter. The second one was in Washington, D.C., in which he was organizing. He established an organization called American Muslim Alliance, or AMA, and he came in order to organize a chapter of that organization in Tampa, Florida. And of course, I was there listening to him. And most of the people there were actually of origins from South Asia, Indian subcontinent. Very few Arabs were there. I guess these are the people that he was more connected to at the time. And he made a very powerful presentation why they need to organize. And of course, I was pushing that line too. And then we had our own conversation about the difficulties and challenges that he was facing in trying to organize the Muslim community politically around the United States. At the time, there were even calls that this kind of activity is un-Islamic. It's not even sanctioned by religion, that you are living in a non-Muslim country, and therefore there are certain precepts, certain things that you're supposed to adhere to, which is, of course, was nonsense. I mean, but this is the challenges we were facing. I remember having these discussions all over the United States at the time. We were pushing it pretty hard, but he was doing it even more structurally, because he established an organization that was trying to take these ideas into actual practice. And he struggled with it, but he was able eventually to establish, I believe, something to the neighborhood of 30, 32 different chapters all around the country. And of course, it was, a lot of people were afraid of getting into politics because of not just the challenges and the religious aspects of some people talking against it, but also from the fact that this is a nonprofit. It's not going to be a nonprofit. This is going to be there are going to be a lot of challenges trying to finance it, because it's not tax deductible and all that. And he wasn't afraid to do this. And he was looking for these pioneers that will partner with him in order to make this a reality. And he found few people, and then started expanding. It was at the time also that there were 3 other organizations that were coming into being. I remember MPAC, but it was more regionally placed in California. It was the idea of Dr. Maher Hathout, maybe a couple of years before. Later on, CARE came about, but they opted for the civil rights path and being nonprofit. In other words, very little political action was taking place, even though they have a lot of education. And there was the American Muslim Council, the one that came in Washington, D.C., but it was more D.C. than across the nation. So his project was probably the most comprehensive in trying to address people in their communities all over the United States at the time. And that was the idea. And he took that idea further by trying to unite all these efforts that were trying to get Muslims engaged politically across the United States, particularly when we talk about, starting in 95, 96, right after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, and turning the empire, turning its sides towards what they called the new threat, and this was pushed pretty hard. Maybe we can do a full episode on that. And Islam became an obvious target starting, in about mid-1993, I would say. It became pretty clear that not only just the media, but also government agencies have been trying to target the Islamic community, the Muslim community in the United States. And come 1995, there were efforts to start making this into bills, actual bills in Congress. And I can recall the whole episode, of how they tried several times, particularly after the Oklahoma City bombing. And then in 96, they actually passed a bill, and lots of provisions within the immigration legislation in which the Muslim community was targeted. And that's when we started our campaign against secret evidence. And I had many, many, many discussions and conversations with Dr. Agha. Dr. Agha wasn't just a great intellect and academic, but he also was a brilliant strategist. I mean, he's able to comprehend the challenges and bring solutions that would have a far-reaching impact on the Muslims in general. So we saw eye to eye in almost all the cases. He was very committed. He was very committed to all the great issues of our time, very committed to Palestine, very committed to Kashmir, very committed to the different challenges that Muslims were facing around the world. He was at the forefront when Bosnia was the center of attention, in the mid-1995 and onward. He was there when the Muslims in India were being massacred, leading that effort, or when famine took place in Somalia, or whatever the case might have been. But he was also had close eye to the empowerment of American Muslims, because he thought that is the path towards solving many of the problems, that Washington was the capital of the world, where many of these policies that impact the Muslim world, as well as Muslim Americans, were made in Washington, and you cannot engage with these problems without having a seat at the table, or at least your voice being heard. And he saw this long before anyone did within the Muslim community, and he was addressing it with real solutions. So he was the chairman of both efforts to bring the Muslims together. First was called American Political AMPCC, American Muslim Political Coordination Council, AMPCC. He was the chairman of that, and he which brought these organizations I was talking about, AMC, CARE, IMPACT, and others. And then after 9/11, after this tragic events, after this tragedy took place, that came into also another coalition that was called American Muslim Task Force, AMT, on civil rights and elections. And he was also the chairman of that. And they were pushing very hard against the Islamophobia that was taking place and engulfing the country. He was pushing against all these policies that were targeting Muslims. And he wasn't afraid, unlike many leaders. And this is what is so unique about Dr. Agha. He was really the ultimate leader, but also the courageous one. That's why you will feel comfortable in his presence, that he was not going to compromise on any of these issues. He was probably the only leader I can recall, and this is after my house arrest, when the case of Dr. Afia was taken center stage. I was under house arrest, and I was appalled, of course, with her treatment and with everything that was taking place. And I was looking because anybody would visit me, a lot of people would come and visit me, and I would be asking them, what are they doing for Dr. Afia? And I would be met with silence or some words that have really no real meaning or impact. But there, Dr. Agha, not only was he voicing open and public position on that case, but he was also pushing others to do something. I remember one day he brought to me a famous, an important senator from Pakistan, from the Pakistani parliament. And we had a long discussion about her case, and he was pushing it pretty hard, and he was working, around the clock, trying to get the attention of these authorities towards her case. That shows, and he wasn't recognized, he wasn't looking for recognition, he wasn't looking for anything or of any benefit or anything. He did it because he had that heart, the heart that cared about suffering, that cared about human rights, that cared about justice deeply. I remember during my case, at the beginning, many people were so afraid, were just terrified of what's happening. If this happens to Sami, who's been to the White House numerous times, who's been with all these leaders, meeting with them, and talking with them, if they did that to him, what are they going to do to us? So everybody, withdrew basically, and my family felt abandoned for a long time until we won the case. But not Dr. Agha. Dr. Agha would come and visit with me, and he would be, calling on my family, checking on them, and raising the profile of the case everywhere he goes, and he was very committed. I remember when when the government was desperate to end this case, and they wanted to do anything just to end it, and using a plea bargain, in which we wrote basically what the plea bargain was, which is to admit to certain things that in the general sense would not be looked at as being or considered as being criminal in any way, shape, or form, because they wanted to end the case. But Dr. Agha was, he said, go on and we need to win this case fully. And so he was this rare leader that would bring hope, that will bring ideas, and that they will bring action that will, he said at one time to me that he rarely spends a weekend at home. He maybe about 40 or 50, sometimes in some years, that he would be out of the home in the weekends, organizing, mobilizing, talking, strategizing, uniting, bringing hope to people, bring them together. That's the rare leadership quality that Dr. Agha epitomized, that he showed, and the love. I don't think there wasn't a single time that he came to Washington in which we spent at least 2-3 nights together. Out of a busy day, he would come at the end of the day, and we would be spending until the early hours in the morning, and talking and exchanging all kinds of ideas. I could see that how much he cared about young people, which is also very rare. He always would try to mentor, to get them to use interns, try to mentor them, and try to give them whatever wisdom and piece of advice he could in order to bring them to the forefront of this challenge, which is how to empower the Muslim community. I can go on and on, talking about Dr. Agha. He is a dear, dear friend and a brother to me. I would never forget all the things he did. And I think we need to preserve his legacy. We need to talk about it to the young generations. They need to know these people who built this community. I mentioned in the article Dr. Ismail Farouqi, Dr. Jamal Barazanji, Dr. Maher Hathout, Dr. Muhammad T. Mehdi, who many people don't even know who that person is. He was among the first who was talking about this, in the face of Zionists, in the face of many challenges, he didn't fear. Warith Muhammad is another name that should also be mentioned and celebrated. And I know that he is being celebrated by a large number of our brothers and sisters in the African-American community. So all these icons all these people who actually sacrificed and gave their life for this struggle, they have to be celebrated. This, the American Muslim community, if organized and mobilized and they put their act and the act together, I think they can have a tremendous impact on the whole world. And that's what Dr. Agha realized, that the empowerment of the American Muslim community could have a lot of good for Muslims around the world. And that is the legacy, that is the message. And he also built coalitions with many non-Muslims. He was not sectarian at all. Yes, he cared deeply about the future and the affairs of the American Muslim community, but he went beyond that. He established coalitions, with leftists, because the issue to him was justice, wasn't religion. And he established coalitions and he established all kinds of frameworks with others, because he realized that at the end of the day, this is about having a better society, not just for American Muslims, but for the whole American society. And that meant that we have to establish these links and to have to establish these cooperations. And finally, on the night, he mentioned, I don't know if you're going to bring it in the clip or not, the secret evidence thing. And, I was leading that effort, but he knew everything I was doing and he was helping every step of the way. And when it came at the crucial time, when one of the campaigns, George W. Bush, when they reached out to me and said, okay, because there was basically neck to neck, what can we do to earn the support of the Muslim community? And our judgment at the time, and I discussed that with him, is that if we win our civil rights battle, then we can be on our way to empower this community. And if this candidate was willing to do away with secret evidence, which was our civil rights, at least in the American community, the immigrant community, then we would have accomplished a lot. And after he did what we asked him to do, which is to bring it to the attention of the nation and to commit to the end of the use of secret evidence, which he did publicly in the second debate, then it was the judgment of the American Muslim leaders at the time, led by Dr. Agha, because we had, after he declared that, we had a very long conference call across the nation. He was, I made the presentation, but he was leading that discussion as the chairman of that body, and he was able to bring everybody together, and we met in Washington, we did this, and we made a difference. It's an experiment of how, and he was always talking about the block vote, the importance of the block vote, and he was very keen on this. His strategy was that Muslims are hardly 1 or 2% of the population, and for them to make a difference, they will all have to come together and make a difference where it counts. And he was very strategic in his choices, in his work. His brilliance showed. And I would also point out, for those who haven't seen some of his writings, I had in prison 2 books coming out. One was poetry book, the other was basically a narrative about what I was doing. And he wrote the introduction to both books. I put them on the website and the Facebook. So if people want to go there and turn and read, I think one is like 8 or 9 pages, the other about a dozen pages or so, about 20 pages of, you could see the brilliance of that individual, of that brother, how he thought about the issues and how he came about talking about it, defining them, framing them, and bringing solutions.
Alhamdulillah, before we invite Brother Nabi Fai, Dr. Nabi Fai, to weigh in on his his thoughts, his remembrance. What I'd like to do is, especially for the benefit of those who don't know who Dr. Agha Saeed is, or just know of him by reputation, I would like for us to play a clip that is very relevant to a number of things that you just touched upon, Dr. El-Arian. This clip has to do with the decision in 2008 to develop a scorecard with a goal of achieving maximum voter turnout. This is vintage our brother.
What happened in 2008, we said we will not endorse any candidate, but we issued a scorecard. Along with that, we also said we want Muslims to support those candidates who support these issues. And we said the goal for ourselves is to achieve the highest voter turnout in the history of this country. Then we hired a company by the name of Gleason Research Associates. We gave them a lot of money. They did a scientific study. I'm pleased and proud to tell you, Gleason company came out and said out of a sample of 38,000 Muslims, that Muslims were the highest voting percentage-wise bloc in this country. 95% of eligible voters, Muslim, came out to vote. That's the highest percentage bar none. African American, 89%. The second group was 76%, 63%, 51%, and so on and so forth. So Muslims demonstrated the highest discipline of detail in this time for the whole community. That's the achievement. And then again, we showed that we are not really relevant, and we are having the ability to build consensus democratically in the community and move on that, and people agree on that. Similarly, now Muslims are trying to build think tanks. A number of them do.
Alhamdulillah. Next, we're going to hear from Dr. Ghulam-Nabi Fai. I would like for you to weigh in, Dr. Fai, on your introduction to Dr. Agha Saeed, how you first met, and you know, some of the memorable experiences that you had with him over the years through the, you know, human rights oriented work that you both were doing, the political and human rights oriented work.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I totally endorse what Dr. Sami Al-Arian just said. I am really honored to share my reflection with two lovely brothers, Dr. Sami Al-Arian and you, El-Hajj Saalakhan, and particularly our daughter, Sasha Mariam Saeed. You know, just a few days back, I wrote that the passing of Dr. Agha Saeed is a colossal loss for American Muslim community. After listening to Dr. Sami Al-Arian, I really mean it, what I wrote a few days back. Because those who know Dr. Agha Saeed, he was really a fascinating personality. What was really more important to me, and to many others who really know Dr. Agha Saeed, that he had the beautiful qualities of pen, intellect, mind, and heart. And to tell you frankly that he has so many qualities. And as Dr. Sami Al-Arian said, he was a brilliant thinker. He was a strategist. He was a political scientist. And he was many, Allah has given him many qualities. But one of the most beautiful quality I have really seen in Dr. Agha Saeed, that he was a kind person in the real sense of the term. And as Dr. Sami Al-Arian mentioned, that when you really talk about the kindness of Dr. Agha Saeed, it has absolutely no boundary. To him, it didn't matter whether you are from Pakistan, you are a Muslim, you are this, you are that, but as long as you are someone who really needed the help, so he was so kind to everybody, and his compassion has really no limitations. And it so happened, I was listening to Dr. Sami Al-Arian because I met Dr. Agha Saeed in March of 1990, and he also mentioned that he met Dr. Agha Saeed first time, that was in 90 or 91. But to me, I know the date because I had a very distinguished guest from New York. He was, we called him as the, in fact, Dr. Agha Saeed gave him the title there. He is the encyclopedia on Kashmir, because he was the advisor to the Secretary General of United Nations for 22 years. He was from Kashmir. So we had a meeting in our office. So somehow he came to know that I am in Washington and we have established a council there, and I had the guest there. Just see the brilliance, as Dr. Sami was saying. I really, honest to God, I really remember it like anything. You don't remember many things, but this was something because I had two giants in my office, Dr. Ambassador Yusuf Bush, his name was Ambassador Yusuf Bush, and Dr. Agha Saeed. By the way, Ambassador Yusuf Bush, he would always tell me, how is that Berkeley professor? So Dr. Agha Saeed told me that, Faisal, you know, when you talk to your own people in Pakistan, in Urdu, you call Sahab, although I'm not Sahab. So he said, Faisal, Kashmir has a really international sanctity, but we must use two tools. We must have two weapons. So I got a little worried because that time in Kashmir, there was some militancy. I said, I don't know what Dr. Agha Saeed is talking about, the weapons. He said, if we can use two weapons, we can really, this sanctity of Kashmir, it can move the world, provided we can use these two weapons. So I said, what are these two weapons? He said, one weapon is the moral argument. We have to use the moral argument. And second one is that we have to use the peaceful advocacy. Anyone really, Dr. Sami Al-Arian, he has been here, he has met with so many government officials. Those people who really meet with the people who really matter on the corridors of power in Washington, New York, and whatever. When you present to them any international conflict, any international issue, for that matter, may Allah bless you, Brother Saalakhan, you have taken a very important cause of Afia Siddiqui. When you are going to present your case on these two grounds, moral argument and peaceful advocacy, it is really going to really move the people towards you. And I also remember that he has really deep love for the people of Kashmir. And also the Muslims of America, because I remember once he was here and Dr. Sami Al-Arian mentioned Dr. Maharatul, may Allah bless his soul too. So they had the meeting, board meeting of this American Political Coordination Council. And he has called me, he said, you should come there and you should brief the board about Kashmir. And Dr. Maharatul, he was chairing the board meeting. So he has given me the time, and by the time I reached Washington, DC, and I could not find the parking, and I was a little late. So by the time I reached to the hotel, and some of the board members, they were leaving. So he said, no, you cannot leave because Dr. Fai is here. He is going to brief the board. So Dr. Maharatul, he brought everybody in. So that was his love towards Kashmir. But what he really told me that he said, you know, Faisal, why I want the American Muslims to establish this American Muslim Alliance. And by the way, he has also established a very important Pakistani organization, Pakistani American Democratic Forum, and also obviously American Muslim Task Force and Political Action Committee. He said, I want, these are his words. He said, I want to prick the conscience of American Muslims. Brothers, please listen carefully, subhanAllah. You know, what was really his vision? He said, I want to prick the conscience of American Muslims that you have a very important contribution to make to the American society. But at the same time, this is also very important. At the same time, don't feel shy by saying that you are a Muslim. Dr. Agha Saeed, he was proud Muslim. He was proud American. I remember telling me, and he has also written about that. He said, I am really delighted that finally the entire world had started having a conversation about Islam. Then he wrote also that I am delighted that Quran is the most read book in America, and Maulana Rumi is the most read poet in America. I remember in one of the AMA conventions, I think it was in 2003, he announced, I am sure it will be in the video, he announced with a pride, he said, I am an American, I am a Muslim, and I vote. That was really the character of Agha Saeed, Dr. Sami Al-Arian was saying. We should not feel shy to say we are Muslim because we have a positive contribution to make. He also told me a story. I am sure he might have shared that story to you. So many stories. But this is really interesting, particularly for those people who really lose hope. They don't see anything. They think there is nothing, no light at the end of the tunnel. And he told me that when he established particularly this American Muslim Alliance, and he came to, and he wanted to meet the people in different cities and different towns and different states. He said, I came to know that there are two brothers in New Jersey, and they are very active in American public square. He said, these are the people I want to know. Those people who are really already doing something in the public square of America, I really need to meet with them. He said, Faisab, I took the flight, I went to New Jersey. To my surprise, both these brothers, they were not in town, and they had left the town. He said, I had nobody to talk to that time. Then what I did, I went to the hotel, and I opened the yellow pages. Brothers and sisters, listen carefully, subhanAllah. And this is just the beginning. He could have just lost his hope. He said, I opened the yellow pages. I started collecting the Muslim names in New Jersey and in that particular area. I took the telephone numbers and I called few of them, to the surprise of Dr. Saeed and everybody here. 3 years later, and this was the time when nobody was there except the yellow pages. Nobody was there. 3 years later, when there was an event in the same state of New Jersey, there were more than 1,000 people, and you know who was the keynote speaker? That time, then the governor of New Jersey, I think her name was Kristen Todd Whitman, who later on became the director of EPA. So what I am saying that he never lost hope. There was absolutely nobody there except the yellow pages. But why? Because the sincerity was there. And this is really the basic. Wallahi, this is the basic. If you are sincere, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to open the doors for you. If there was no sincerity in Dr. Agha Saeed, he did not see anybody. But he had the sincerity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened the doors for him. And let me tell you also for his vision, particularly those brothers who are concerned about the Kashmir. Once we had a meeting, because we met so many times in Washington, because most of the time they had these board meetings in Washington. And to tell you frankly, Brother El-Hajj Saalakhan, there is hardly a board meeting, whether it was AMA, whether it was Pakistani American Democratic Forum, whether it was American Muslim Task Force or Political Action Committee, no matter what kind of board meeting was, he always invited me to brief the board, even if it is for a few seconds. So that was really his love towards Kashmir. But what I am saying, the vision about Kashmir. So at one time we had a meeting, and there was a meeting between the Indian Foreign Secretary and the Pakistani Foreign Secretary. I do not remember the name of Indian Foreign Secretary, but the Pakistani Foreign Secretary, his name was Ambassador Shamshad Ahmad. So he was the Foreign Secretary of Pakistan. They had a meeting. So he said, Faisal, they are wasting time. I said, Agha Saab, as I told you, we say Agha Saab. So Agha Saab, this is good because they are talking. He said, but they are talking about Kashmir and you are not there. The people of Kashmir, who is representing you? I said, no, you are right, there is nobody. He said, now India and Pakistan and you mean the Kashmiri people, you are also making a mistake. You are saying that there are three parties to the dispute, India, Pakistan, Kashmir. That is also wrong. That is also false. I said, Agha Saab, why? Because we are the party. He said, no, there is only one party to the issue, and that is the people of Kashmir. That is the principal party, and the primary party is only one, that's the people of Kashmir. India and Pakistan, they are the secondary parties to it. Dr. Sami Al-Arian mentioned, I do not know how many people know that Time magazine called Dr. Agha Saeed as the person of moderation. Time magazine. It's not a paper on the streets of Karachi or New Delhi or Kashmir, or even for that matter here or there. It's a Time magazine, a person of moderation. Then I met a person, you might have heard his name, May Allah bless Dr. Agha Saeed and his brother Agha Bilal. So they arranged my lecture at Monterey, this Naval School of Graduate Studies. So there was a gentleman, his name was Mark Hinkle. So he used to be the national chairman of United States Libertarian Party. By the way, when we had the janaza, the other day I could see he was also there. So he told me there, because he attended my lecture, he told me, he said, this Agha, by the way, Agha Saeed, may Allah bless his soul, even that time he could not speak there, but Agha Bilal has arranged that whole event there. So this Mark Hinkle, a non-Muslim, he said, this Professor Dr. Agha Saeed, so he is a visionary leader because he understands, listen, because he understands, Dr. Agha Saeed understands, this is a non-Muslim political leader telling me, because he understands that the people of different faith and the people of different religions and the people of different political orientation can find a common ground, provided you have the open mind. So when you see this kind of gratitude, this kind of statement coming from a non-Muslim, then you can say, mashallah, our brother, he was really a great scholar. So as I told you that there are a lot of things, but I want to tell you one thing. After watching, although I was not there at the funeral, but after watching the sentiments of the people, particularly our daughter Sasha, who was there. So I can tell you one thing. I remember Winston Churchill. I'm sure that most of you have heard the name. Winston Churchill was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. What he said about Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Winston Churchill said about Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, he said, I cannot forget this great man from my heart. Winston Churchill talking about Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. I cannot forget this great leader from my heart. I am sure not only those who are here, but those who are beyond, most of the brothers and sisters who have really had spent some time with Agha Saeed, I am sure they cannot forget this great leader from their hearts. So the only thing we have to do, the only thing we can do to raise our hands to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to place his soul in Jannatul Firdaus. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you so much. My dear sister, Sasha Saeed, we knew Dr.
Assalamu alaikum. Oh, I just said salaam alaikum.
Walaikum salam, sister. We knew Dr. Agha Saeed as the consummate activist-oriented academic. You knew him as your Abu. As your Abu. Please share with the audience who Agha Saeed was on the most interpersonal level.
Okay, I'll try to do my best. First of all, thank you for honoring my father. Thank you for inviting me to speak. Thank you for all the outpour of support and love towards me and the entire Agha Saeed Khan family during this time. You know, and it's kind of this duality because he was this public figure, but he was also a father and a brother and a friend. And, you know, I will say, I'll share one story. So I was born in Berkeley. My father was getting his PhD at the time, and we lived there. And at the age of 4, we had a VCR. This is how long ago it was. Some of these young people might not even know what a VCR was. Google it. But we had a VCR, and at the age of 4, my dad decided that he was going to show me the movie Roots. And for those of you who don't know Roots, it's a film. I forget who made it, but it's basically about. Thank you. And it's basically about slavery and about this character named Kunta Kinte. And I forget how long it is. I feel like it went on forever. But he decided at the age of 4, he's like, it's time for you to watch this. I mean, and I was like, at 4, I was like, Sound of Music, Mary Poppins, and Sesame Street. That was my jam. And he's like, let's switch it up. So he puts on the film, and you know, in the beginning, there's the scene with Kunta Kinte and his girlfriend, and they're kissing, and he's like, inappropriate, behuda, which means inappropriate, behuda, hatao. And so we fast forward that part, and then there's the part where they cut Kunta Kinte's leg off, and I still remember he paused the VCR, or stopped it, and he said, let me explain to you what used to happen. let me explain to you that they will give men a choice, where do you want to be cut? And I'll spare the details, but I, for a long time, did not understand why he thought that was okay. Because I was like, I just really want to watch Sesame Street. Like, this is way too much trauma. But, my father became very ill by the time I had graduated high school. And today I'm a caseworker in East Oakland, which is one of the most impacted cities in the United States. Or as Trump said, the most dangerous city in Oakland. Oakland is the most dangerous city in America. But I am able to understand the George Floyds and the and not even that. I mean, there's people like George Floyd or Oscar Grant who become these symbols of what systemic and institutional racism is. But as a teacher and as a caseworker, I see it every day. And I never thought in a place like Oakland or Berkeley or Alameda County there would be this level of racism, but it's everywhere and it's built into the system. And the system is created for people to fail. And at the age of 4, my dad was able to hammer that into my head. Now, I may not have been super happy about that experience, because it was traumatic. He made me watch the part where they cut the leg off. But 20 years later, 25 years later, I understand why he did those things. I understand, and I am so grateful because I did not really, once he became ill, our relationship changed. And he was able to educate me at a very young, at the age of 16, he asked me to read Orientalism by Dr. Agha Saeed. And I still remember it was like, I had a really high reading level, but that's dense reading. That's graduate level reading. And I remember I was like, I don't really understand all of it, but I understood the otherization of people. I understood what colonialism and imperialism and how that ties into capitalism and the Orient and the Occident, and most importantly, the otherization. That's what Dr. Cornel West also talks about. He says, he has a different word for it, which I'm not going to say, but he put these fundamental ideas into my head. And I think, when I was younger, it was more like, and it's funny because I've been talking to my uncles and we've been all kind of reminiscing and everything. And like, I also think that it is not easy to be an activist. It is not easy to do what Dr. Sami did, to do what my dad did, because it requires a lot of sacrifice. And, it's interesting because in Southern California, you get a lot of people who come because of the entertainment industry, right? That's what brings people there from all over the world. Up here, people come here to be woke and activists, and they're like, they think it just drives me crazy when people are like, oh, I'm an activist. Assata Shakur was an activist. My dad was an activist. Dr. Sami was an activist. Huey Newton was an activist. It requires sacrifice. It requires sacrifice of self. It requires sacrifice of family. It is not for everybody, And he was an exceptional man. He had the capability to look and have a vision that was far beyond his years. I remember in 1992, 1993, he used to talk about getting Muslims elected. So I see Ilhan Omar, I see Rashida Tlaib, I see that he created a foundation for these other Muslim brothers and sisters to come up and flourish. And, I think there's always founding fathers, and it's kind of like things happen afterwards, but he laid down that framework. And, I didn't get to spend a lot of time with him as a kid as much as other kids do because he was so busy, because his time was devoted to the cause. But I also think that he has given me a knowledge and an understanding of the world that is incomparable. And, my aunt and uncle are on as well. I don't know if Bilal Chachu, if you want to share about this, but, we've also been learning about our grandfather and how our grandfather in Pakistan was also very political and also very, he was a courageous man. He went against the fold. He went against the norm. And there is a price, it's like being a soldier. You're gonna get hurt. You might even die. It's like being a soldier. So, the Bilal Chachu, who I think is on here, he was telling us about my grandfather, who I never met. He passed away before I was born. But in Pakistan, they're from Lahore, which is in Punjab. They would have the newspaper come every morning. And my grandfather, he would take the koila, which is like, when you burn I don't know the word for it in English, but you know when you, the black dust when you burn something? Anyways, he would take this black thing and he would circle different news articles. And my father's full name is Agha Saeed, so he would put K for Khalid. My other uncle, who's also passed, peace be upon him, Tariq Chachu, he would put T for Tariq. And then my other uncle who's on here, Bilal Chachu, he would put B for Bilal, and he would circle them. And then their assignment for the day, they had to read that. And then at night, they had this big house, and the men would sleep on one side, the women would sleep on the other side. And so I guess my grandfather would then sit down and quiz them and say, tell me what you saw, tell me what you learned, you know, and at a very young age would pull that information. So I think my dad does come from greatness and from this very courageous background. And he was also, I think the things that he tried to teach me as a kid, like watching Roots, watching El Norte, marching for Palestine, all at the age of 3 or 4, you know, it creates a foundation. And I believe that his father created a foundation. And, you know, politics is in our blood. It's part of who we are. And I think the thing for the next generation is to create balance, because you have to understand this is a very dangerous, it's almost, you have to understand, I mean, you guys are freedom fighters and professors and thinkers, but by law enforcement agencies, you're treated like gangsters. So you have to learn how to deal with that reality, you know, that's just the truth of the matter. So, and people suffer. And, you know, I want to continue the work that my dad did, but I also want to create more balance, you know? So it's about, I think, so anyways, I feel like I've gone on this whole tangent. I forgot what you asked me. So, sorry, bear with me. It's all the emotions and not eating and sleeping and just, you know, trying to show up. But he definitely was, and also I will say this, he was the love for him, the love that he had for me was so absolute. And it was to the point of delusional and pathological. You know, it was, and I'm not just saying that because he was my dad, like that's how it was. I mean, if I said, give me your right arm, he would have cut off his right arm and given it to me. That's the kind of dude he was. That's the kind of man he was. You know, and we're all complex creatures. We all have our shortcomings. We all have things that we struggle with, you know, and I want to learn from the good things that he did, but I also want to learn from the things that hindered him, because I think that part of continuing your family legacy is also learning what didn't work, you know, and changing that. And I think being a woman, you know, growing up in the Bay Area, I do see the world differently, you know, and so it's just an interesting thing. And you know, yeah, so sorry, I don't know how to end this monologue that I've gone on.
Alhamdulillah, sister, you know, I feel the fire.
It's genetic.
You are a reminder of the old poetic adage, you know, that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I see your father in you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a great compliment.
You know, next, and this is a perfect segue, I want to share another clip.
Okay.
This one having to do with, well, it's a reflection of your father's courage. You know, as an activist who has been engaged in the trenches on so many issues for as long as I have seen how, you know, how folk, you know, in fact, people who are often known for, you know, having courage and integrity, how they can be cowed by powerful forces, especially forces coming from a repressive government. I have seen up close and personal how some of our Muslim and non-Muslim brethren, and especially those who occupy positions that many of us view as being positions of security, of social, political, and financial security, mm-hmm. how they can be cowed, you know, into going against their better selves when things get rough. Your father, what distinguished your father for me was his willingness as an immigrant Muslim, you know, to challenge himself, and through the challenge of himself to challenge, you know, the systems around him. And this clip that we're about to play is a perfect example of that. You know, some COINTELPRO was, you know, the government's counterintelligence program that was initiated in the early part of the last century that achieved public fruition in the middle part of the last century, and supposedly was put to rest, but we know COINTELPRO is alive and well to this very day. Yep. In fact, operating in a far more muscular and sinister way than it did years ago.
It ain't even secret anymore. They're just out and about.
That's right. That's right. It's out
like
in
here.
your face.
Shout out to the insurrection.
Yes, indeed. So what we're going to see now is a clip of your father speaking on COINTELPRO at a conference. And I'm sure that there were many within in the audience of that conference that were kind of fidgeting in their seats, feeling a bit uncomfortable. Dr. Saeed, why are you going here? But alhamdulillah, this is again a reflection of the courage that he had and the principles that he stood by.
It's in the context of this thing that Muslims then were subjected to COINTELPRO, counterintelligence program. As we all know, counterintelligence program was conceptualized in 1920s. It was fully developed in 1950s. First it was applied to the African American and to the Communist Party, then Socialist Workers Party, then African American community, then Latino community, then Arab community, and so on and so forth. And today this is being applied to Muslims. If you were to take the essence of COINTELPRO over the last 70 years, we can summarize it in 6 points. Number one, when any community is subjected to counterintelligence, the law enforcement agencies, particularly FBI, seeks to undermine its leadership. They try to create new leadership in the community. Secondly, they try to undermine its legitimate organizations, and nowhere the demonstration of that was clearer than in case of Holy Land Foundation case, where they had listed 307 organizations as unindicted co-conspirators. When you are an unindicted co-conspirator in a case, then you don't have the ability to plead your case, to clear your name, to fight back because you're not invited to do so. And if the principal party is convicted, then you are seen convicted automatically. But even without that, you are seen to have been indicted in the court of public opinion, if not in the court of law. Undermining Muslim organizations has been done through the courts and through the Senate committees that have demanded of the IRS to give them the records of number of organizations, including ISNA, ICNA, CARE, and other organizations, so they can frighten the members. They were not able to find anything wrong, but they were able to create enough suspicion in the community that people start walking away from these organizations. The third important, most important thing in COINTELPRO is to control the agenda of the target community. And we saw that very clearly. Now we know declassified documents from the FBI work in the 1950s and 60s. In the last 4 years of the Black Panther Party, its main leaders had been either expelled or put in prison or shot dead or forced to run away. And the entire Central Committee consisted of FBI agents, and they totally altered the agenda of those organizations. So third and most important thing in COINTELPRO is to control the agenda of the target community. Fourth is to disrupt internal unity. There's a declassified FBI document which says we should make sure there is no unity in the FBI, in the African American community, and also we should make sure that neither Dr. King, nor Honorable Elijah Muhammad, nor Stokely Carmichael, nor Imam Jamil Amin, any of them becomes a major leader in the community. And we see each one of them is targeted to a smear campaign after that. That smear campaign is no different than the smear campaign launched against by FBI against CARE at this time, and we fully repudiate that. Fifth issue is to deny them access to means of mass communication, access to White House, access to Justice Department, access to the State Department, which in some cases is a clear denial of the First Amendment rights, because among other things, First Amendment includes the right to petition your government for redress of grievances. When somebody is denied that right, that's a clear violation of the US Constitution. And the sixth is to bleed that community economically. All you have to do is institute 15, 20, 30, 40 lawsuits against them. Every case costs you $2 million, $3 million. The community is done for. This is the essence of what our community has been subjected to in the last several years, and that's what we have dealt with. And I want to congratulate the Muslim community for its courage, its conviction, its maturity, and its sophistication with which they have dealt with this thing. Brothers and sisters, what has come our way is a tsunami. No matter how strong your house is, when the tsunami comes, your house is going to get demolished. You may rebuild it, but it's going to get demolished. Alhamdulillah, Muslim community has been subjected to this tsunami of Islamophobia, of hatred, hostility, not only by the people on the street, but also law enforcement agencies. When John Ashcroft says, as the Attorney General of the United States, that I know I worship a real God, and Muslims worship a God, he said actually, we worship a God who sacrificed his son for us, and Muslims worship a God who asks you to sacrifice your son for him, and we worship a real God. When the Attorney General says that, who is supposed to defend my civil liberties along with everybody else, we know that we are not subjected to this prejudice of the ignorant, but the prejudice of the learned and powerful. It's the prejudice of the learned and the powerful that's most difficult to resist. And Muslim community has done an admirable job. Let me tell you, on the negative side, yes, people are in despair conditions, people are frightened, people are scared, people are confused. Young people feel their representation is not being done by the national organization effectively. They are not able to fight back. But let's take stock of the situation that has done. For instance, in the middle of this entire campaign of Islamophobia, by Allah's grace, we have produced 2 Muslim congressmen in the United States Congress, have we not? And AMT was involved with both of those candidates from day one. Brother Sami Al-Arian will remember that I had called a meeting, conference call of all major organizations. We brought Keith Ellison as a candidate, introduced them, and started doing fundraising for him. So we have been building this thing brick by brick. Now we have 10 people elected to state assemblies, 3 of them elected out of St. Louis, Missouri.
Sorry, I'm having some. Are you asking me a question?
Brother Saalakhan, you are muted, so you have to unmute.
Oh, okay, that's what it was. Okay. I think you're muted right now. We can't hear you.
Oh my goodness, what happened here? All right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Thank you.
All right. I want to get some reaction to that clip. Let's begin with you, Sasha.
Well, it's actually just nice to hear my dad's voice, first of all, because he was sick for so long and he lost his ability to speak, which was truly a huge test from Allah. And you know, I was speaking to my aunt who's on here today. I know it's a little harder for her to share, but you know, he was an incredible speaker, and it was a very big test from Allah to not be able to speak. You know, I often used to think about that president. I think it was Roosevelt. Who was in a wheelchair? Was it Roosevelt?
Roosevelt, yes.
But I was like, you know, like, let's say, God forbid, he was paralyzed waist down. He would have still been, if he could just talk, I mean, you know, nothing could stop him. He was unstoppable. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what I remember, and the passion and the fire, you know. But I also think that people who are given the gift of passion and fire, then you also have to learn how to balance it. So it's a double-edged sword. But he was just so courageous, you know. I think that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest takeaway. You know, he was really courageous when it came to these ideas of justice and these ideas of equity. And I think he was far beyond his years, because I remember the things that he used to say, and I see them now, especially in the 2020 election. I just saw a lot of those ideas unfold, and people are kind of waking up to this idea of social justice and equity now, which he was talking about in the 90s, in the early 90s, you know what I mean? So he was truly, and this is actually not the 90s, I think this clip is from the 2000s, but, you know, it was still that he was a visionary, he was an incredible orator, he was well beyond his years, and he was courageous. And I think that's an incredible combination, you know, because a lot of people are smart, a lot of people are visionary, but a lot of people are cowards too. My father wasn't a coward, you know. He wasn't a perfect man, but he also wasn't a coward. And, you know, yeah, anyways, go ahead.
Well, Brother Sami, your thoughts?
Yes. I mean, what I just heard brings lots of memories. He certainly was a courageous man, someone who would speak truth to power. I remember in several occasions where he would be meeting with powerful people, he would be speaking the same language. He's not going to compromise or give them some sort of praise so that he can have a picture with them or something. No, he would certainly always bring these thorny, difficult challenges to the attention of those people. But you could see from that clip that you are dealing with somebody who just not process, but analyze information and giving you what needs to be done in order to confront these challenges. That was Agha Saeed. I remember one time, during the height of our secret evidence battle, he invited me to this was an AMC event that Brother Abdurrahman Al-Amoudi organized. And, the brother also suffered terribly in this fight. But there was Jesse Jackson. He invited me to that meeting, and he told me, you have 1 minute to make your case. Because he was about to go to speak to the community. So, and that minute, actually, we spent, pleasantries and this and that. And then on our way to the elevator, it was in a hotel in one room, and we're going down, maybe about 2-3 minutes. So I gave him everything I knew about secret evidence in a way that he could comprehend it. And I said, is this enough? He said, don't worry about it. This guy's a brilliant man. He will know. And Jesse Jackson, with the 2-3 minutes I gave him, he spoke 15 minutes about secret evidence. And he was able actually to take all the ideas and with his orators. So he knew people. He knew how to, I wouldn't say utilize them, but he knew how to address them and how to build these kind of momentums and coalitions. And certainly that particular night, I remember how elated we were, because somebody of that stature, this was in May 2000, Akhi. This is before Bush and before everyone else was talking about secret evidence. This was in the midst of it, but we were struggling. We were struggling with getting attention on that score. So he was there with us, and he was thinking, and he was bringing his energy and his thoughts and his brilliance into this fight. But going back to this clip, it shows how he was thinking. He was thinking strategically. That's how important his presence was during this period. You may have many people who speak good, and they can move people, and they have lots of passion, and they are results type people, but their thinking may not be adequate for the time, because they do not have this long-term futuristic type of mentality in which they can see what the challenges are and deal with them adequately. But Brother Saeed, Dr. Agha Saeed, was the type that he knew how to think strategically and how to bring solutions that could address these strategic challenges. And that was probably his most important contribution to the empowerment project of Muslims in America. And that's why whenever he was there in any meeting, he would be the one that would be a consensus on making him the chair. Whatever the project was, we would come, bring ideas, but people would say, okay, Brother Agha would be the chairman of that group or that group. So that's why he was involved in all these projects. And in most of them, if not all of them, he would be chairing these organizations, whether it was a Muslim American Muslims, whether it was Pakistani Americans, whether it was on the issues of different ideas or different challenges that people were addressing. He would always be the consensus leader and builder of that organization. And I would also, I hope that one day we can, Sasha maybe can help us with that, get all his papers and all his possessions. And because unfortunately, we never had the opportunity to, for him to write his memoirs. I knew he was writing a lot, but we need a research project by which we can analyze all his contributions, because that's his legacy. His legacy is what he stood for. I remember my son is a historian, and about, I think, around perhaps 2010, when he was about to finish his PhD, I asked him, I begged him actually, I said, we may lose lots of our leaders and we need to preserve what's happening here. This is a historical moment. So I had him make interviews with Maher Hathout, with Jamal Barzanji, and with Dr. Agha Saeed. Agha Saeed, 2 years after that, he confided in me that he was diagnosed with Parkinson, and this may slow him down. And of course, by 2014, it was very difficult for him to speak or to communicate directly. So I thank God that I gave my son that advice and he actually acted upon it. And there are some interviews that they haven't been published yet. They haven't been made into a book or anything, but that's one of the future projects that I hope my son would write, which is the history of American Muslims during this particular period, in which we could see that there is African American community has been a target for a long time, no doubt about that. But we know a lot about this period, but we don't know much yet about how Muslims were targeted right after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and it will become part of this civil rights legacy in American society. And I think you've been part of this. I mean, you've witnessed, and you've been also in the trenches defending all these people who have been targeted. Jamil Amin, Afia Siddiqui, myself, Holy Land, you name them. Dozens and dozens, and the coalition was established basically so that we can address some of these excesses and government overreach. But Dr. Agha certainly has been an important and key player, and we need to let our new generation, our youth, and our future generations to know the sacrifices of these icons. That we need a research study group who can analyze all these papers and analyze this period, and we don't want the others to write our history or our narratives. We should do our own. So I'm hoping that somehow we can find the students and the institutions that can actually take this mission and bring it into fruition. This is very important. And whoever is left of that generation, I think we should also try to depose them, to have them give us their memories. We need to preserve these memories. One shortcoming we have as a community in the United States is very few people write their memoirs. And that you leave that to your enemies, and of course I am guilty of that too. I'm hoping that before I die, that I would write my memoir, and that people would know the actual history rather than that we hear it from the others where they try to distort it. But you too, Brother Mauri, you've done a lot, and I hope that one day you can also hear, hopefully in a book, but also at least in audio fashion. But we need to do this. We need to institutionalize our contribution to this struggle, that this struggle is far from being over, and things may even get worse before they get better. And that, as Brother Saeed said, and this is so, he could see the future, because he very much understood the ground rules, understood the struggle and the fight. How one of the tools that will be used against us is how they're gonna institute new leadership, or at least undermine whatever leadership that is genuine and true of the community. And indeed, that's what they've been doing. We saw it during the book that came in 2007 under the title Building Moderate Muslim Networks. Many people misunderstood that book, or not, at least they didn't get the essence of what the book is about, because it was never really laid out in the book. They said we need to build a project along the lines of Congress for Cultural Freedom, which was a project that the CIA led in Europe between the 1958 and 1966. Guess who sent me both books, the book Moderate Muslim Networks and Who Paid the Piper, which was the project upon which this RAND study was built upon. Both books I got in prison from Dr. Saeed. He was thinking of me while he was reading this, and he sent me both books, which I immediately understood what's at stake here. How the government is trying to establish a new leadership, new organizations to take over whatever is left of the genuine organization that existed, and he was, he was laying out one step after that. I said they used 6 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's exactly what was happening. And he understood that, and he was trying to stand up to this by talking about it, by mobilizing, by organizing, by uniting, by informing, by educating. That this is a struggle that's going to continue, and it's in the same venue as other struggles, in the same way that other struggles were taking place or have been taking place in the US. And he mentioned, the African American community, the communists, the social workers, the Arab community, and so on and so forth. So this man is a person who understood exactly what the challenges were. He knew how to face them. He did his best. Sometimes he would be the sole leader across the continent, who would be cautioning many other leaders that they need to strengthen their backbone and face up to this challenge. I saw this firsthand. I witnessed this firsthand. We had many conversations discussing it, and I could see his elation, his joy when people join him, and his frustration and feeling of sadness when they don't. He certainly was there on the beat, addressing these issues, and it was very sad for me that in the last few years of his life he wasn't able to express these things more orally and impact what was happening, and that made me really feel sad. And but his legacy will endure. His presence is with us. I remember also that he was writing, I think, a couple of books, which I hope he finished, but if not, I'm sure there will be a lot of notes that we can bring them also into. And one of them was to lay out the vision and the experience that he had. Dr. Agha Saeed is a person that is very difficult to no one, I mean, anybody who's come across or met him would not forget him. But at the same time, I am very happy that we had a personality like Dr. Agha Saeed to celebrate and to know and to be remembered in the American Muslim community as someone who has built a legacy and who has built a genuine role model that people can emulate, people can look up to. And that's what's so important. At the end, Akhi, we will die. And I think what happens is that people will remember other people. So if you lived for a goal that is much bigger than your own, people will remember you. And if people spend their life trying to build fortunes or personal goals, which is fine, people will just not recognize them. Now our friend here, our brother here, was from the first, from the former. He was not living for himself. He could have if he wanted to, but he wasn't. He was a humble person. He would meet with if we were in a meeting and somebody wanted to speak, he would give whoever the chance to speak and express their opinion, and he would be extremely respectful of the child before the old, of the woman before the man, of the enemy, actually, even before the friend. I mean, he was open to everybody. He stood his ground. He was courageous. He cared deeply about the issues. He could be thinking about 3 or 4 different issues exactly at the same time and addressing them one by one. And that's the type of person, which is very rare. I mean, you're not going to find that kind of leadership duplicating pretty quickly. So that's why it's very important that we tell our next generations who Dr. Agha Saeed is. That's why it's very important that we preserve his legacy, and along with others. And I hope, again, that our organizations, the leaders that exist today, that they will honor this, that Dr. Agha Saeed will take his place among the great in building our community along with others. The same thing I could say also about Imam Jamil Amin, who's been, Imam Jamil Amin at one point in the 90s was one of the icons of the community. How we just forget him so easily while he's even living. It just breaks your heart that we really need to be a little bit more courageous. I remember Dr. Agha Saeed, whenever he had the opportunity, he would always bring the issue of Dr. Jamil, Imam Jamil. He didn't forget him. I mean, that's the type of leadership we should be looking for. We shouldn't be just, today we celebrate a lot of accomplishment within the Muslim community. All right, so it's time to resolve these issues, the issue of Dr. Afia, the issue of the Holy Land, the issue of Jamil Amin, these are the real issues that will make a difference. If we're successful along these issues, that's when I can say that, okay, we're becoming empowered. But if all we care about is access somewhere here and getting an appointment here or there where you really don't make much of a difference, to me, that's not success. I measure success with the difficulty of the issues and how we are able to make a difference, how we can resolve these issues. These are tough issues, but that's what empowerment is about, is to be successful on these big issues. So again, if looking at today's leaders in the Muslim community, I would like to beseech them, to ask them, to beg them actually to start looking at the life of Dr. Agha Saeed and see how he dealt with these big issues and continue his legacy of confronting these big issues and pressing hard. Now, if we are going to celebrate Biden, he is appointing so many Muslims, he is, his friend to the Muslim community, he pledged to do this, do that. Ask him the tough questions. Ask him the tough questions. How long are we going to endure these injustices taking place in our community? And we know they are injustices. And we find every day, whether from the Justice Department or from former officials, how much our brothers and sisters have been railroaded. A lot of these cases need to be reopened. If they care about justice, and look what our other communities are doing, our cousins and others, they have been able to bring a lot of relief to many of their challenges, and we need to do the same. And that's what I hope that if people want to remember Dr. Agha Saeed, is that he was not backing down. He will always speak up. He will always say truth to power. He will always bring these difficult issues regardless. And he didn't care about pleasing others. He cared about making our voices heard so that we can bring relief, we can bring justice to those who have been denied relief and justice.
Indeed. Brothers and sisters, we generally, the Coalition for Civil Freedoms webinars, they run about 90 minutes on average. We've already passed that mark, but this is a very special event, and in fact, it seems like we crossed that mark all too quickly. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to ask our brother Dr. Ghulam-Nabi Fai to also respond to that, his thoughts on that clip that we just saw of our brother speaking on COINTELPRO, and along with any other closing thought he might want to share. And then we're going to show one last very short clip, and then again hear from Sasha before I make closing remarks, inshallah. Dr. Ghulam, are you?
Yes, Al-Hajj, thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether I was in this particular event, but I was in an event when, may Allah bless his soul, when Dr. Agha Saeed mentioned these 6 points. And obviously his main objective was to educate and re-educate our brothers. And it was full to the capacity. I do not know how many people, but it was really full to the capacity. And I could feel a sensation in the room. And as you know that he mentioned care and ICNA, even in this clip, but that time he also mentioned care and ICNA. So alhamdulillah, because of the persistence of the leadership of both care and ICNA and others, so mashallah, I don't need to tell you, mashallah, so they are growing, and there is acceptance not only among the Muslim community, but among others. So I would like to respond what Dr. Sami Al-Arian's daughter, Lina, when she extended the invitation to me, I will just quote her because that's a very relevant quote what Dr. Agha Saeed was saying in this clip. Lina Al-Arian, she said that Dr. Agha Saeed, he was the living example of speaking the truth to the power. And he was unapologetic when it comes to the issue of Islam. and obviously he never compromised on that. But I would like to really briefly, because you are also doing something about Jamil Al-Amin. I invited Jamil Al-Amin to Temple University in mid-80s. It's a very interesting story. So usually they would pay for the speaker, but the speaker has to be very important and he has to be very known, and they will pay his airfare and maybe half night. I mean, if it is $100 hotel, they will pay $50. So our director, we call it SAC, Student Activity Center. He was a very nice brother, Afro-American person. He was the director. So I went to him, I told him that we have a speaker and I would like to apply for the funding. He said, okay, you apply for the funding and tell me who is the speaker. I said, Rob Brown. So he said, Mr. Fai, say it again. I said, Rob Brown. He said, you are inviting Rob Brown? I said, yeah. I said, I am inviting Rob Brown. He said, if you are inviting him, how are you inviting him? I said, I have already talked to him. He's coming. He said, just put whatever you want. So I put $2,500. As I told you, they would pay $500. I put $2,500 and I put $1,000 honorarium. So, and I put 2 nights hotel and whatever. So I called Jamil Al-Amin. I think his office picked up the phone. I told him that we are providing the honorarium. He said, brother, you don't need to do that. I said, no, I have to do it because the university is paying. So what I am saying, alhamdulillah, so he was that, I'm talking about maybe 85 or 86. So the minute I said Rob Brown, because Jamil Al-Amin, his original name was Rob Brown. So that was really the greatness, and that is the greatness of Jamil Al-Amin. We cannot forget that. But I would like to mention one thing, because Sasha is here. I do not know whether she knows it or not, because this is the personal side of Dr. Agha Saeed. I remember he called me in 1993. The reason I remember it because I had the guest from Kashmir. When we met in 1990, and that time I had the guest, but the guest has come from New York. But this guest came from Kashmir. His name was Abdul Ghani Loan. So Agha Saeed asked me, he said, Faisal, I would like to adopt an orphan from Kashmir. So I have a daughter, I want her to have a baby sister. So if it's a baby sister, so I really would like to have one orphan from Kashmir. So I told him, okay, I have a guest here. So can you talk to him? He said, who is he? I said, his name is Abdul Ghani Loan. He said, who is he? Because he was our leader in Kashmir. By the way, he was assassinated by Indian army later on. So he said, no, then I don't need to talk to him. Dr. Agha Saeed came from San Francisco to Washington. He stayed with me for 2 days just to talk to Abdul Ghani Loan to adopt a baby sister for Sasha from Kashmir. So by the way, we identified 3 people, but unfortunately they could not get the passport, so they could not come here. So lastly, I would like to say, as Dr. Sami Al-Arian, I think he mentioned, maybe he wrote it somewhere because I read it. So he said that the history of American Muslim community is incomplete if we really fail to recognize the contribution of Dr. Agha Saeed. So I would suggest to Sasha or Agha Bilal, I can text him if he's not here. So there are 2 people who have really had the close association with Dr. Agha Saeed, and they have also taken the notes. And in fact, they have published those their meetings with Dr. Agha Saeed. One is Ras Siddiqui. So he writes in Pakistan News. So he may have a lot of these memories. And one is obviously Salim Akhtar. So if someone could talk to them and compile this, that really could become a very important document. And finally, Sasha, I am sure when he used to send me a text, Al-Hajj, when he used to send me a text, it would be 2-3 pages, not 1 page, not 1 sentence, it would be 2-3 pages. If we can collect just those text messages, if we can collect those text messages, it will be really something great, inshallah. So may Allah bless his soul again. As I told you, we have to pray for him. That's the least we have to do. And may Allah bless Sasha and Agha Bilal and other family members. So,
and I think I don't know if Al-Mizan is on. My cousin wanted to share. I was hoping he could just share a few words. He was my dad's nephew. And Omazan, are you on here?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, this is
Yes,
my
go
cousin
ahead.
Omazan. This is my dad's sister's son. We're the same age. We grew up together. I've been bugging him since 1988. Yeah, he had a very close relationship with my father, and I'd like him to share on his behalf, his beloved nephew.
Go ahead, my brother.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And on behalf of my family, I just wanted to express to all of you a sincere thank you. I think the joke my uncle would have made is it's really heartening to see so many people attending this call, and to also say a thank you to all the NSA members that are not showing up on the attendee list. But one thing you had asked Brother Mauri of trying to paint a personal picture of our uncle. The first thing to note, as my cousin Mariam said, we come from a political family in Pakistan. My grandfather, my mother's father, was a politician, Agha Saeed, and all of his sons were named Agha Saeed. So Mariam's father, Agha Khalid Saeed, Agha Bilal Saeed, Agha Babur Saeed, Agha Ali Saeed, Agha Tariq Saeed. So all of my uncles are Agha Saeed. But coming from this family, my mother and her sister, the two daughters in that family, Nilufar Khan and Nazli Farooq, it's a very close family. The only thing that matters is family and ensuring the well-being of your family. And when I say family, we include friends. That is earned family throughout life. The family you're born with is given to you, and your friends are family you earned throughout life. And I think that's how my uncle saw it. So I just wanted, there's a lot of folks have expressed condolences about the last few years of his life. And that's one pinpoint that I would like to touch on, because it is unfortunate. My uncle was perhaps the greatest orator I've ever seen. Several of you have touched on his intellectual capacity and his gift for crafting a powerful message. Two things that he told me in life were, if you want to have an argument with somebody, you have to understand their argument better than they do. If you don't understand them, you can't reason with them. The second thing that he told me was actually with regards to giving speeches. He saw me one day, I think I had to deliver a message for school, and I was writing out everything I intended to say. I was going to memorize it and deliver a speech that way. And he said, if you ever want to give a speech, the way to give a good speech is to outline a topic, have bullet points for all of your subjects, and then as you're delivering it, you move from point to point. But as you can see from all of his speeches, the wonderful clips that you played, my uncle was very much somebody who wanted to address the people he was speaking to. It was never something that was canned. He was always for the moment. But the last thing I just want to express is, towards the end of his life, as you touched on, he was not able to speak verbally, which is a cruel twist of fate for somebody who was so gifted in that way. But the real lesson that we can take from that is every time we would visit him, my family, my wife and I, he would register a twinkle in his eye. He would still greet you. He never once complained about his situation or station to my mother, whom he was very close with. He chose any opportunity he had to communicate by expressing his love for people and how happy he was to see them. And that's why I don't want to gloss over the last few years, because as much as he could still do at the end, he did. And we really have no excuse. I should talk about myself. I have no excuse for any hardships to claim here or there, because he had every excuse there was, and he never made an excuse. So if he was here, I think what he would ask from all of us is, he got us to the race and he got off the blocks for us. Now he has passed the baton to all of us here to try to continue the hard work that we're currently doing. And there's obviously a lot of hard work that still needs to be done. But he was somebody who was warm, which is why we are all here. And I think what he would encourage us to do is keep going, keep fighting, to keep being kind to each other, because there will be hard moments in life. We will continue to have grief. But the impact that he had on us will be one where we can celebrate those small wins along the way, take that personal time to value and love each other along the way. So I just wanted to express that. I really appreciate the time that you've given me. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah, we appreciate your words, my brother. Before we move to this final clip, my goodness, I'm losing my mind. Is Brother Salim Akhtar on? Is he on this webinar? And if you are, Brother Salim, could you please make yourself known if you are? You know, Brother Salim was the link for many of us with our brother. It doesn't appear that he is on, or if he is, he's not able to connect with us. But I just want to recognize Brother Muhammad Salim Akhtar. He was that link, that critical link for many of us with Dr. Agha Saeed, both when he was healthy and especially after he became very ill. He was a critical link, and I want to salute him for that. All right, without any further ado, I want us to show the final clip on the Muslim community's relationship with law enforcement. This is especially important now, given the atmosphere that we are in nationally in this country, with the Black Lives Matter movement, with the emphasis on social justice and political justice related issues. I mean, this is very critical. These words that he spoke about the Muslim community's relationship with law enforcement, and the 5 demands that he recommended that we pursue. Without any further ado, let's see that clip.
Now, having said that, let me conclude by telling you something that I think is very much contemporary, very much relevant, something we need to take stand on, something we need to be very clear about, and that's the present status of relationship between Muslim community and law enforcement agencies. We have said it repeatedly, regardless of anything else, as citizens, as human beings, it's our duty to keep America safe and secure, and we will fulfill that duty with no qualifications and no reservations. Having said that, we also said at the same time, we will not accept being a second-class citizen in this country no matter what. You cannot use religion to disqualify people, as Judge John Gleeson of New York has said in the judgment he gave on 16th of June 2006, in which he said, if you're not a citizen, you can be held solely on the basis of your religion, country of origin, or ethnicity, indefinitely without explanation. When a judge says anybody can be held indefinitely without explanation solely on the basis of their religion or country of origin or ethnicity, that's fascism, that's not democracy. We reject fascism, we accept democracy. Having said that, let's also say what's happening right now, and that's why all major Muslim organizations, I want to emphasize, all major Muslim organizations have come together to make 5 demands of the Justice Department. Number 1, please stop infiltrating our mosques, harassing our imams, and intimidating our worshippers. Secondly, we are asking them not to use these moles, these agent provocateurs, to send them into our mosque and our organizations and try to trap unsuspecting youth. The job of the government is not to trick people into doing something wrong and then punish them. The job of the government is to enable people to do the right thing for the right reason at the right time. The government of the United States is failing in its job. Number 3, we're asking U.S. government not to use guilt by association as a legal category. Number 4, we are asking them not to try to undermine organizations like CARE and ISNA and NAT and others. It's for us to decide who our leaders will be. It's not for anybody else. I want to tell Mr. Eric Holder with greatest respect. First of all, I want you to join me in congratulating Mr. Eric Holder at getting the job he has got. We hope he'll fix the mistakes of the past. But also I want to tell him in no uncertain terms that as clearly and as politely as I could, Mr. Eric Holder, it's not for you to decide who our leaders will be, it's for us to decide who our leaders are. And if we decide it's going to Umar Ahmed or it's going to be Nihad Awad, then there are leaders and you cannot make any difference there. Let me be very clear on that one. And finally, I want to tell our leaders and the leaders in the community at large that they should stop spreading Islamophobia through these 56 fusion centers. There are 56 fusion centers funded by the US government. The job of these fusion centers is to take information, billions of bits of legal and quasi-legal information, consolidate it, interpret it, and make it available to these law enforcement agencies at the state level, local level, and federal level in a manner they can implement it. That is full of Islamophobia. That's not a job of the government to create hatred against a community by using government resources. These are our 5 demands. I want us to stay strong on that one. We will always do the right thing for the right reason, but we'll never shy away from demanding our rights as equal citizens of this country.
Sasha, can you take a minute to just share a closing thought from on behalf of yourself and your family on today's webinar, inshallah ta'ala?
Yeah, it's really interesting actually, because Islamically they talk about how the spirit after somebody passes, it goes away after the funeral. I believe Islamically we believe that after everybody leaves the janazah, then they come down. But I have felt my father's presence more so before the funeral. It was palpable before the funeral. But I still feel it, and I was laughing to myself, and I think Bilal Chachi would agree with me, my uncle Bilal. If my dad was alive, or if he could communicate right now, he'd be like, hey, I know you guys are sad that I passed, but let's do some fundraising, let's do some planning, let's get into action. That's who he was. He'd be like, listen, I know you're sad, but let's keep it moving. That's the kind of person he was. He stopped for nothing. And I think the takeaway from today is, for myself, for the family and the younger generation, is to keep going forward and to keep fighting for those things, and seeing what worked and what didn't work, and creating that balance. I think that's important too. So it's unfortunate, but I feel like it has really brought our family closer through this death, and we've been able to really sit down and honor my father, and just have some great conversations, which I'm so grateful for. But I think that my father, if I'm correct, and if I can feel his spirit, he would say, okay, enough crying, let's get back to work, guys, let's go. That's who he was.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much.
Most welcome.
Go ahead. Who was that? All right.
Assalamu alaikum.
That's my uncle Bilal.
This is Agha Bilal. I just want to say a few words, if that's permissible.
If you can be very brief, brother, please, because I'm sure that there are many folk out there who knew and loved this brother who...
This is my dad's younger brother, who is very close to him.
Okay, alhamdulillah.
Yeah,
all right.
so very important for him to share.
All right, go ahead, brother, go ahead.
I was just listening for the last 2 hours, and
yes,
there are certain things which I want to convey. In the last 6 or 7 months, there were certain nights which we both take 8 to 10 hours to complete 1 page of text and send it. And he is willing to wake up all day, all night to complete that 1 message, what he wants to send it out. And he is not willing to sleep that 24/7 that he wants to complete. And he asking me, Bilal, and then he raise his hand and say, 5 more minutes, please. 5 more minutes. And that 5 minutes go 6 hours, and the message is still going on. And when he finished that one, you have to see his face, the joy on his face. I'm going to miss that. But that was...
We're all having a hard time.
Yes, that was Dr. Agha Saeed was. And that's really hard for me when I say that he was, but he is still with me, living every day. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
And I just want to give a shout out to my uncle Bilal, because he was he's an exemplary brother. He's in the pantheon of brothers. He was an all-star. He was a soldier. He was my father was a very lucky man to have a brother like Bilal. So thank you. It's hard for all of us right now.
Yes, subhanallah. Yeah, thank you, Brother Bilal. Thank you on behalf of all of us. Sasha, before we close out, is there anyone else that you feel really needs to have a minute to say something?
No, I think we've covered everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Dr. Sami Al-Arian, I just want to thank you, brother, publicly. I want to thank you for being the link for connecting, and you didn't know this until now, the link that connected Dr. Agha Saeed and I on a more personal level. I had known Dr. Saeed, and we knew each other. I knew him, he knew me by reputation and by running into each other from time to time at different events. You know, we knew each other by reputation. We knew what each other did, but we never had a relationship. And sometimes I would see Dr. Agha Saeed, and he was one of the brothers who I would catch sometimes staring at me. I mean, we'd be in a public space and he would be staring at me, and I would wonder, okay, I wonder what he's thinking. And it wasn't until later, after our connection through you on a deeper level, that, you know, I was able to connect the dots. And, you know, and it came through after you were released. When you were released on that home confinement, before you were, you know, finally completely released and basically exported from the United States. When he visited you after you were released to home confinement, and then, you know, I came, we were in the same space. That began a relationship with him on a deeper level. We had some one-on-one conversation, and then subsequent to that, to my pleasant surprise, through Brother Salim Akhtar, I got a message that he wanted me to visit him at his home in California. And that was the first of, I think, 3 visits that I paid to him on the West Coast. I mean, he arranged for the transportation. I stayed in his home, and what he did was something that really touched me on a very deep level, because, you know, this was a time, especially after I had embraced the case of Dr. Afia Siddiqui, when, you know, the efforts to keep me at a distance from many prominent leaders and organizations in the US, you know, kind of hit its peak. And, you know, there was actually an attempt to kind of isolate me. And so when he invited me out to his home that first time, and then the second and third trip, he did so, you know, not just to have me visit him and to have discourse, but, you know, to try to connect me with some of the folk that he knew on the West Coast that he felt could open up some doors and bring some much needed support our way. So, and I was deeply, deeply grateful to him for that. But I was also grateful to you, my brother, because you were that, you know, that link that brought the two of us together on that deeper level. So I, you know, without knowing it, I thank you. The qadr of Allah is a beautiful qadr. You know, Allah is the best knower and the best of planners. The final thing I'll say before, you know, this closing dua that I want to make is political work around political prisoners is a very difficult, a very challenging, a very intimidating work. Usually on my birthday, you know, I want to do something. I try to do something for others. And today, February 26th, is my birthday. And I ended up having 2 programs that I was invited to be involved in. This one, and then one later this evening with one of the universities out down in the South. And this was my way of you know, alhamdulillah, I thank Allah that this was my way of being able to give a gift, to thank Allah for my birth, you know, on this day so many years ago. But I would like to take advantage of the moment and take advantage of a habit that I've seen quite a bit in social media, especially on Facebook, where folk who have birthdays invite folk to donate to good causes, to worthy causes, as a gift to them. I think this is my first time ever doing this, but I want to extend an invitation or request to our brothers and sisters who are watching this this video with this live presentation right now, as well as those who will see it later. If on this day of February 26, 2021, you can, as a gift toward your brother Saalakhan, make a donation to 2 organizations. Just split the gift in half, those who are willing to do so. If it's a $10 gift, $5 for the Coalition for Civil Freedoms, and $5 toward the Afia Foundation. If it's $50, $25 one way, $25 the other way. I ask this because, you know, these 2 organizations, the one that I serve as Director of Operations for, and the other that I am one of the board members of, are 2 organizations whose work is very, very, very dear to my heart, and it is absolutely necessary. Neither of these organizations get the kind of support that we need and that we warrant. So if you can, you know, in the spirit of the brother who we were gathered here on this platform for today, if you can do that, inshallah ta'ala, it would be deeply, deeply appreciated. With that said, I want to close out with this dua. It is my understanding that one of the prayers of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for the deceased was the following, in translation, with a little bit of modification. O Allah, our brother Agha Saeed has come to you leaving behind his deeds, his family, and his home. Accept the best of his deeds, O Allah, and give him a better family and a better home. Expand his grave, O Lord, and provide it with light. Do not let his grave be a trial for him beyond what he has the capacity to bear. And do not let his passing be a trial for his loved ones beyond what they have the capacity to bear. Forgive his sins, Ya Allah, and admit him to paradise. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.